Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Retirement Compass, the show dedicated to helping you successfully navigate to and through your retirement. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley, and joining me in the studio are two financial advisors from Stonebridge Wealth Systems. We have Tim Kulhanek, who is the co-founder, and we have partner Jeremy Gove. We've got an important show for you today. We're going to be diving deeply into a lot of the risks that are affecting people who are nearing retirement and those of you who might already be enjoying your retirement. We want you to be protected from these risks and mitigate them as much as possible. Tim, Jeremy, great to be back in the studio with you. How are you this week?
Pleasure. Great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. And Jeremy, how are you?
Very well. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, I know that there are a lot of concerns that are at the top of most people's minds. There's no way we could get to all of them in a 30-minute show, but we've pulled out some key top risks that we know folks are concerned about. These are things you're hearing about when people are coming in and meeting with you for the first time. I know you've had the pleasure of meeting with a lot of our television show viewers when they come in to meet with you. So first off, let's talk about market volatility, because that is a huge concern, especially when folks are facing the reality of being on a fixed income.
Yeah, absolutely. So market volatility, let's just kind of define it to start with.
Okay. And
how is it measured? So one of the easy ways that people can see what's going on in the market and get kind of a 30-day snapshot of where the market sees the risk going, or where the risk is and where the market's going to go, it's called the VIX. That's the CBOE Volatility Index. And a lot of people will call it the fear gauge, because it's determining when it's really high, there's a lot of fear in the market, and when it's really low, it's more calm, right? And so just to kind of put this in perspective for our viewers, recently the VIX was at 13.45. Okay, so that's relatively low. And to put that in perspective, back in 2008 during the financial crisis, the VIX was actually at 80.86. So after the election, everything's a little bit more calm right now. And the market sees that being there for the next 30 days. But we don't see it very far beyond that. But the point of why that's important, why market volatility is important, is obviously we want our accounts to grow. And if we're starting to utilize those accounts, where are we putting our assets? Where are we investing in? How much risk do they have to go up or down with the market? And obviously we want to be able to diversify our accounts. So that's why market volatility is an important thing to keep in mind as we're doing our planning.
Yeah, and I would say the other thing you got to keep in mind when you're talking about market volatility is to not get too caught up on the short-term movements. We saw after the election, there was like a gap up is what we call it. So there was a big jump in equity prices right after the election. But then we saw those levels get tested. So the market came back down. So it kind of looked like an upside down U for a time period.
Right.
But since then we've seen if you look like the S&P 500, it's actually now above those levels that it hit when it gapped up initially. So, a lot of people I was seeing online like, oh, well, here goes the market. I knew it was going to take off if, my person won. And then when it started to come down, oh, here goes the market. It's going to crash now. We don't want to get too caught up in those short-term movements. The reality is the average intra-year decline for the S&P 500 over the last 30, 40 years is 14%. So we're going to have those movements. Really the key and what's critical is having a long-term plan, and again, a plan that was designed by a holistic financial planner.
Right.
So that way it's designed to work long-term.
Right. Well, I think the main issue specifically for retirees with market volatility, there's a difference between when you're working and you're accumulating and you are putting money away into your accounts. You almost want to have market volatility. Why? Well, guess what? When the market goes down, that's a great buying opportunity. Sure. Usually people are engaging in dollar cost averaging, which is to your benefit. The hard part is once you are looking at that same pot of money, if you will, to live off of for the rest of your life, it's really frightening to see it going up and down and doing the roller coaster thing, right?
Yeah.
And so there's something known as sequence of returns risk, which I think a lot of folks aren't even aware of, but that's why they're fearful of it. So can you explain what that is and why it's so critical to be safeguarded, if you will, against that risk in particular?
Yeah, especially for retirees. So we like to call it the retirement red zone, like 5 to 7 years before you retire. And the 5 to 7 years after. And it's the most critical time period where you don't want to have a substantial loss, okay? Right. because the reality is there's a difference between the accumulation phase and the distribution phase. We specialize primarily in that distribution phase. It's like the difference between a cardiologist and a pulmonologist. They're both critical to make sure that the body functions properly, but you probably don't want the guy that's in charge of working on your lungs doing your heart valve work.
Right.
So it's kind of the same thing when it comes to financial planning. So specifically, if we're talking about sequence of returns risk, I'm gonna pull up a graphic here on the screen and just kind of illustrate exactly what it means. I think I can just kind of describe what the graphic is showing us. And so it's a graphic showing the sequence of returns risk. And if we don't have that, there it is, okay. So sequence of returns risk, just imagine you're newly retired. It's the turn of the millennia. You just went through the Y2K. You stayed up all night to make sure that the world didn't end going into the year 2000. And with a sigh of relief, your head hits the pillow. You're laying in bed and you're like, finally I could retire. Everything's fine. Well, I'm sorry to give you the bad news, but 2000 was the beginning of a 3-year bear market. We call a bear market a 20% or more decline from a recent high. And so you can see, using the S&P 500 as an example, if you had $1 million in the year 2000, this is on the left-hand side for our viewers out there, we're just running, you got the year and the beginning of year value. That $1 million is what you started with. Now you just retired, and so you got to live on something. So you got a little bit of Social Security coming in. You're going to just supplement that with a 5% withdrawal from your IRA, let's say. So that's $50,000. And you're going to be, good to go. It's going to be great. The problem is sequence of returns risk. It rears its ugly head. There's pitfalls along the way, this retirement path. And so you get a 10% decline, followed by 13%, followed by 23%. And by the end of the 4th year of your retirement, that $1 million has almost been cut in half. And here's the big problem. You never catch up. You never get out of the hole. Now, if you weren't taking any money out, and you just took the returns from 2000 through 2023, and then on the right-hand side, the chart on the right-hand side of the screen, you look at the returns, but you just flip them. It's the inverse. It's 2023 through 2000. If you weren't taking any money out, is the average return between those two the same, or is it different?
The average rate of return is the same.
It's exact same because it's exact same numbers.
That 23-year period, right.
Exactly. But the ending outcome was drastically different. In one, you ran out of money in like 17 years, sequence of returns risk. In the other, you've got like $1.6 million left and you achieved all your goals. And so you were actually able to have the head hit the pillow and sleep well at night. One of the things that we think is so critical for pre-retirees to plan for and to have a solution for is that sequence of returns risk. The strategies you were using during that accumulation phase when you're like, I'm working for another 15, 20 years, I'm not that worried about it. That's not the same strategies you should be using in retirement. The strategies that a pulmonologist use are not the same strategies that a cardiologist will use or any other specialty, and it's the same thing when it comes to planning for your retirement.
Well, and what's important to point out, if we can pull up that chart one more time, is that we don't have control over when the market is going to take a downturn. So for someone who retired right at 2000, look at that. I mean, that was a vast difference. They're on track to run out of money versus if you retired and the market didn't do that, right? They didn't have that many negative bad returns right in those first 3 years. The outcome is completely different. And that's the point, is we don't have control over market volatility. This is why sequence of returns risk has to be talked about, has to be understood, and has to be planned for.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so one of the ways we do that is through diversification. So we talk a lot about tax buckets. We also want to talk about, where we're investing our money. So by diversifying our portfolio, we could have some money that's at higher risk. Maybe that's in stocks specifically, some money that's in ETFs, some money that's in muni bonds. Tim's talked about those a few times. But we want to have some money that if the market is going down, that's probably holding its value or potentially gaining value, depending on what's going on. And there's a lot of different ways to mitigate that risk. One that we really like to use is we like to use options that hedge the downside. So we call them buffers. So you might have some protection because of the option where you might have a hedge of 20%. So if the S&P dropped 20%, we'd be okay. If it drops more than that, we'd lose some money. And so utilizing tools like that, or even annuities where your principal's protected. In a down year, you might have a 0% return, but in an up year, you might get a percentage of whatever the market went up at that time. And we're not talking about variable annuities. Variable annuities are still in the market all the time. We're talking about index annuities or even fixed annuities. But the point is we want to have a diversified portfolio of different tools that we're using to put that together to assemble our overall portfolio. So when we're retired, a lot of people will say, well, my portfolio is not keeping up with the S&P 500. Well, you really don't want it to, because that means we're probably taking more risk than we should.
Interesting.
Because if it's going up that much, it's going to go down as much as
it's subject to potentially going down.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So we want to make sure that we're diversified and we're using tools that actually apply to our specific situation.
You know, you mentioned this retirement red zone, and obviously so far the risks we've talked about today are really critical for those of you watching who are within 5 to 7 years, either before retirement or you've just retired. What would you say to someone who's going, wow, I didn't even think about this. I want to make sure that I have all my ducks in a row, that I'm protecting myself against these risks, especially when it comes to market volatility and sequence of returns?
I think for most people, again, it's something they probably haven't heard about because it's not being discussed. And I would encourage, like financial advisors, make sure you're discussing these things with your clients, talking about tax planning, talking about a more holistic plan. Just the other day, my wife and I, we all have, life's consistent inconsistencies, things come up. And we had a repairman over the house the other day, and it was actually a plumber. And, when he showed up, he came in, he had diagnosed the problem. He said, I think I know what the problem is. He went out to his truck and he had all these different tools, a hand auger, and he had a plunger, and he had whatever he potentially would need in order to solve the issue we were having. When you come into our office, just understand that as holistic planners, we don't have just one tool, okay? We have an entire tool chest to make sure that if your issue is with tax planning, we're gonna make sure that we use the tax planning tools to make sure we solve that problem so you have an efficient distribution plan. And as part of this complimentary written income plan, if your concern is market volatility, as Jeremy said, we've got a set of tools, a suite of options that are gonna help solve those problems. So again, you can sleep well at night and make sure that you're on track for the retirement that you've dreamed of and that you deserve. But it starts with a phone call to that number.
Wonderful. Tim, Jeremy, thank you so much. I know you're excited to connect with more viewers as a result of today's show. So if any of this is resonating with you, if you would like to make sure that you have a comprehensive, holistic, written financial plan in place for yourself, again, this is completely complimentary to you. The team of Stonebridge Wealth Systems would love to be able to meet with you. As Tim said, it starts with making this phone call, 866-256-7778. Or if you'd rather connect online, if you simply pull out your smartphone, you can open up that camera app. Just point, click, and scan that QR code that you see there down in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. That will take you over to a landing page, ask you a few short, simple questions, and then a member of the team from Stonebridge Wealth Systems will reach out to connect with you to schedule your complimentary meeting that way as well. We've got a lot more risks that we're going to get into, some of the top risks that we know that you're concerned about right after this.
If you think about the average American consumer, we don't talk about financial topics very often. And so we spend a lot of time at Stonebridge doing educational seminars and different things that are free of charge. If you're not educated in a topic, how do you make educated decisions? When you're working with a client, you're sitting down with them, they're a little stressed out, but after you go through the process and you really take time to educate them on not only what we're doing for them, but why we're doing it, that really gives them peace of mind, and you can see the weight just kind of drops. And when they leave, I hear all the time,
I really should have done this years ago. But sometimes there's a fear that somebody might try to sell us something. If the things that I can provide, if you don't want, don't need, or can't use those, I've got some good news for you. We're not going to sell them to you. We are fulfilling our fiduciary duty of putting their interests ahead of our own. As Americans, we strive for better. From a better house, to a better career, to a better life for our children and grandchildren. Better has become the American way. When it comes to your retirement, what does better mean to you? Does it mean more income, a flexible lifestyle, better solutions? A better retirement begins with a financial plan. To get your complimentary written financial plan, call the number you see here. You only retire once. This is your opportunity to plan for better.
Well, welcome back to the Retirement Compass. I'm Kristen Oakley here with both Tim and Jeremy, financial advisors with Stonebridge Wealth Systems, and we are talking today about some of the top risks that folks are concerned about, especially for those of you who are in the retirement red zone, meaning you are 5 to 7 years away from retiring or in your first to 5 to 7 years after retirement. Such a critical time to make sure all of the pieces of your financial puzzle are working together comprehensively for you so that you can keep more of your hard-earned money. I mean, there's so many things that can go wrong, especially during that critical window. Obviously, one of the risks that we need to talk about on today's show, if we're talking about top risks, is something known as longevity risk. It's really the big risk that affects and compounds everything else. So explain why that is and why it matters so much for retirees.
Well, so simply put, longevity risk is just outliving your money. What's the likelihood I'm going to live longer than I'm expected to, or longer than I think I'm going to? And so obviously we've had a lot of advancements in healthcare, and so people are living much longer than they used to in the past. And one statistic that I found is that if you are 65 years old today, there's a 25% chance that you're going to actually reach the age of 90. And so if I'm going to retire in my 60s, that means I'm going to have to plan for at least 20 plus years of retirement, right? So I'm going to have to draw money out of my retirement, out of my accounts that I've saved for potentially 30 or 40 years, and use that to live off of. And that can be a scary thing when you're, just thinking about, okay, what does my retirement look like and how am I going to get there? And so, but that's what longevity risk is. It's what's the likelihood that I'm going to outlive my money?
Right. Well, of course, the longer we live, the more healthcare concerns we might have, and the need for long-term care, and the cost of living can double easily 2 or 3 times during that 30-year period, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually did in one of our presentations that we did in one of our workshops, we were talking about inflation. And if you have if you're drawing $4,000 out of your account today, and you have a 4% or 5% inflation over the next 10 years, how much are you drawing out of your account? It's almost $5,900.
Wow.
In 10 years that I'm drawing out, where I was drawing out $4,000 just that short time ago. So if you think about I'm retiring in 20, or I'm going to be retired for 20 or 30 years, what I'm spending today is not going to be what I'm going to be spending 10 years down the road, or 20 or 30. So,
well, I'm curious because obviously one of the things that sets you and the team of Stonebridge Wealth Systems apart is that you specialize in the distribution phase, about helping people almost come down the mountain successfully, right? If we think of when we're accumulating and we're saving, we're going up the mountain. Well, that transition comes where now it's time to withdraw money from those accounts. There's a lot that comes into play. Clearly, having the right withdrawal strategy is so important, but I hear a lot of folks saying, oh, I hope I have enough and I'll just take money from my accounts when I need it and hopefully I don't outlive my money. But that's a strategy of hope is not a strategy, right? It's not a sound financial strategy anyway.
Yeah, I think that was popularized by a former Army general back in the day who wrote a book, and it was called Hope is Not a Strategy. And at the end of the day, you need to have a comprehensive plan. And one of the things that our written financial plan will do when folks come in is it'll actually show them not just asset allocation and asset location, but part of that distribution strategy is your sequence of distribution. So do I take out of the taxable bucket first, the tax deferred, or tax free? And how much do I take out of each of those? Another thing from an asset allocation perspective that a lot of people miss is they think, well, I want to be, let's say 60-40, like middle of the road, moderate risk. So I'm going to have 60% of my money in stocks and 40% in bonds. Now, we don't use stocks and bonds. We use what we call a core satellite approach at our office, which we can talk about more on a one-on-one. But that's actually probably not, if you've got money in each of those 3 buckets, taxable, tax deferred, and tax free, you might not actually, if you had $100,000, just for easy math, let's say $1 million so you can actually retire, right? Rather than just allocating to each of those buckets 60-40, 60-40, 60-40, what we think makes a lot more sense is to look at that 60% and say, okay, I need $600,000 that's more growth oriented. And I'm going to fill that from the bottom up, starting with my Roth, my tax-free money. Because I don't mind if I have unbridled growth in my tax-free money because I've already bought the government out. I never have to pay them again. I don't want unbridled growth in this middle bucket, this tax-deferred bucket. So there really is a lot more to it than just like you said, oh, I'll take some money out and I hope it works out. Just those small shifts we've seen by changing the sequence of distribution as well as the location of those assets according to their risk tolerance could add several $100,000 to your ultimate ending value in retirement, or that you'd have available for withdrawal throughout retirement just by making a few tweaks. The thing we don't have any control over, I don't know what the stock market's going to do.
Right,
my
none of us
crystal
do.
ball
No
is
one
as
has
cloudy
a crystal. Right, yeah.
And so why would I spend all my time talking about how I'm going to get a better return? Now, we think that we've got some great strategies, some volatility buffers that are going to keep people on track, some guardrails to make sure that if things go wild in the market, our clients aren't going to fall all the way to the bottom.
Right.
But that's what we don't have control over. So let's control the controllables. And we can do that by looking at where our money's located, how much risk we're taking, and in which bucket we're taking that risk. And that's really critical.
Yeah, for sure. And again, this speaks to the importance of diversification, making sure your money is in these different buckets. And I know you work with people really deeply to figure out the right withdrawal strategy for them. This is not a cookie cutter approach. It's not a one size fits all.
Right. Well, and if you think about what happened in 2022, people realized bonds are more correlated to stocks than they thought they were. And so there's a lot of times where people, they come into our office and we start to look at their allocation, and they're just not as diversified as they think they are.
Yes.
One of the things that they might have, 7 mutual funds, which makes them think they've got a lot of different stocks. And we start looking at it, all 7 of them own Coca-Cola. So diversification is really important.
No, for sure. Well, if you're watching right now and you're going, you know what, I don't know if I'm properly diversified. I don't know what my guardrails are or should be. This is why the team of Stonebridge Wealth Systems would love to be able to connect with you and deliver you a complimentary written financial plan. Now, this is for no cost, no charge, no obligation. It's simply an invitation to have a conversation to see how they can help and serve you. So to claim yours, call that number on the bottom of your screen, 866-256-7778, or again, you're welcome to scan that QR code and that will get you connected as well. We'll be back with more on our discussion of top risks that are affecting retirees right after this.
Our team is very unique, so we all have different gifts. When you put it all together, it fits well.
Jeremy is definitely our most seasoned and fastest growing advisor we have. He's discerning, so he understands the way we want to do things at Stonebridge, to focus on the client and solving their problems, and that's really what he's passionate about.
I know Tim spends a lot of time making sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed for his clients. And he's not just satisfied knowing the 30,000-foot view, he wants to get down in the weeds and know exactly how it works.
The things that you buy, the stocks, the bonds, the mutual funds, that really isn't that important to the client. What's important to the client is, what does this mean for me? And at the end of the day, what it means is they can sit back and listen to the music. You know that you've got a team, not just one person, but an entire team behind you that's taking care of those things, so you can focus on what's important.
Have you ever considered refinancing your retirement? When interest rates are low, you might be able to refinance your home, your car loan, or even credit card rates, because it would help you keep more of your own money each month. Yet when interest rates go up, it may make sense to refinance your retirement. Higher interest rates could provide income opportunities that you may not be aware of. What works for your portfolio during low interest rates may not work for you when interest rates are high. Find out if a retirement refi could work better for you. Give us a call today and schedule a complimentary Refi Your Retirement review.
Welcome back to the Retirement Compass, where today we've been discussing several of the top risks that affect retirees, especially for those of you that are nearing retirement or have just recently retired. And we were talking during the break that oftentimes, part of the issue that folks are facing is that so much of our financial services industry is based on the accumulation stage of life, and it only focuses on investment management. What you all do, though, is you specialize in helping people know how to take the wealth that they've accumulated and turn it into that reliable, ongoing, steady stream of income that's going to last them for the rest of their lives. I know you have no shortage of stories, but I think it'd be really powerful for our viewers to hear a story of someone that you've worked with, who you've been able to build this comprehensive financial plan from the ground up. So any stories stand out and come to mind?
Yeah, so I just recently had somebody that actually became a client that I was talking to, and we were walking through their portfolio, and it was really obvious that when we were talking about diversification, they were not diversified at all. And he had worked with the same advisor for the last 20 years. He was referred to him by his CPA.
Okay.
And the bottom line is, he took $1 million to this advisor.
20 years ago.
20 years ago.
Okay.
And what he brought over here was $1,100,000. So if you figure out
in the world?
Yeah, it was ridiculous. And it's been, a pretty strong bull market for most of the time.
I know, we had 13 years of the longest running bull market we've ever had. So he's only got 1 million.
$1.1 million.
Yeah. Where did it go?
Well, so he would ride the roller coaster. It would go up.
Right.
The problem is when the market went down, he would actually lose more than what the market did. So, and that was because he wasn't diversified. So, and there's a lot of other reasons for that too, I think. But the point is, we need to have a plan. And that was one of the things that I asked him right when I first sat down with him is, what is your plan? And he said, I don't know. My advisor just keeps telling me, just keep working, or I've got it.
Yeah,
I've got it for you.
You'll be
You're
okay.
good.
Yeah.
I've got it. And obviously he didn't have it. Did he lose any money? Not necessarily, but I would argue that he lost a lot of opportunity,
For sure.
over that 20 years. So, so anyway, that's a big thing. And I think that one of the studies that I read as we were kind of preparing for the show, there's a study that 70% of retirees are concerned they won't have enough savings to last their entire retirement. Well, if you don't have a plan in place, how do you know? So that's one of the things that we spend a lot of time on is we need to have a plan and then put the piece, like Tim's mentioned a lot of times on the show, it's like a puzzle. We're putting pieces that go together, so that you actually have a completed puzzle. We know where the outside edges are. We can help you finish that and then finish the inside of the puzzle too.
And what's interesting is no two plans that you all build for folks are alike. Everyone's different.
Yeah, because everyone has a unique financial situation. That's why I say at our workshops, like when people ask questions, I say, hey, just keep them general in nature. I'm happy to answer your questions. But the reality is everyone comes to this event. It's like everyone out there viewing this, you got a little bit different financial situation than your brother, your sister-in-law, or your mom and dad did. And we want to make sure that we're customizing it to you. So here's what we did. Jeremy put together a nice list of just kind of summarizing of things that we think financial professionals should be helping you with. And if they're not, there'd be a reason to give us a call at the number below. But here's some things that you should be keeping in mind. One, want to make sure that you've created a diversified portfolio that's tailored to your risk tolerance. The number one thing, like the reason why the story that Jeremy just shared, we see this all the time. I just had the same thing when somebody came in my office. He said, oh, I've got FOMO, fear of missing out. And I looked at his statement and he had a bunch of mutual funds with great historical returns, but he'd lost money in all of them because he waited until after they went up, he bought, and then they went down, he sold. Have the right withdrawal strategies to reduce tax liability, navigate healthcare costs, and then finally, making sure that you have the confidence you need. 86% of respondents in a survey felt more confident about their retirement after they met with a financial professional. We hope that's us. Give us a call at the number below.
Wonderful. Tim, Jeremy, thank you so much. Again, if you would like help putting your financial puzzle together for your retirement, you don't have to go it alone. Stonebridge Wealth Systems is here to help and serve you. So to get your complimentary written financial plan, 866-256-7778. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to being back with you next time here on The Retirement Compass.